The radio crackled with static at 2:37 a.m. as tech specialist Emma Walsh adjusted the frequency one more time. The communication equipment tent was cramped, filled with the smell of hot electronics and desert sand that seemed to get into everything. Outside, the forward operating base was quiet except for the distant hum of generators and the occasional footsteps of guards on patrol. Before we dive in, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. Emma had been working on the radio systems for 6 hours straight, trying to establish a clear connection with headquarters. The mission was critical. A team of Navy SEALs needed to coordinate with command for an extraction that was scheduled to happen in less than 4 hours. Without proper communication, the entire operation could fall apart. She wiped sweat from her forehead and looked at the maze of wires and circuit boards spread across her workbench. Emma wasn't supposed to be here. She was a communications technician, not a combat specialist. But when the regular radio operator got sick with food poisoning, she volunteered to take his place. The SEALs had laughed when she first arrived at the base 3 days ago. Lieutenant Jake Harrison had been the most vocal about his doubts. He was the team leader, a tough guy from Texas who had completed more missions than most people could count. When Emma introduced herself, he just shook his head and muttered something about how headquarters was sending kids to do grown-up work. But Emma wasn't just any technician. She had graduated top of her class from the military communications school and had spent 2 years fixing radio equipment in some of the most difficult conditions imaginable. She knew these machines better than anyone, and she wasn't about to let a team down because of a broken radio. The problem was more complex than anyone had expected. The primary communication array had been damaged during a sandstorm 2 days earlier, and the backup systems were running on old equipment that kept losing signal. Emma had identified the issue: a combination of damaged antenna components and interference from the local terrain that was creating dead zones in the communication network. At 3:15 a.m., she heard voices outside the tent. Lieutenant Harrison and his team were getting ready for their pre-mission briefing, but without working radios, they couldn't get the final intelligence updates they needed. Emma could hear the frustration in their voices as they discussed backup plans and contingencies. She had an idea, but it was risky. Emma had noticed that the communication problems were worse during certain times of day, probably because of atmospheric conditions and electromagnetic interference from nearby equipment. If she could modify the frequency range and boost the signal strength by bypassing some safety protocols, she might be able to establish a clear connection. The modification required rewiring several components and adjusting the power output beyond recommended levels. It was the kind of fix that could work perfectly or could fry the entire system. Emma looked at her watch. 3:45 a.m. The SEALs needed to leave for their mission in less than an hour. She started working faster, her fingers moving quickly through the tangle of wires. The soldering iron hissed as she made new connections, and the smell of melting metal filled the small space. Emma had done similar modifications before, but never under this kind of pressure. At 4:23 a.m., she heard Lieutenant Harrison's voice outside the tent, talking to someone on a satellite phone. He was trying to get permission to postpone the mission because of the communication problems. Emma knew that delays could be dangerous. Intelligence had a short shelf life, and the longer they waited, the higher the risk that enemy forces would discover their plans. She made the final connection and powered up the modified radio array. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the speakers crackled to life with a clear, strong signal from headquarters. Emma quickly ran through the system checks. All frequencies were working, signal strength was excellent, and the connection was stable. Lieutenant Harrison appeared at the tent entrance just as Emma was finishing her tests. He looked surprised to see all the green lights on the communication panel. Emma turned to face him and simply said that the radios were ready for the mission. The SEAL team gathered around the communication equipment as Emma established contact with their command center. The voices from headquarters came through crystal clear, and for the next 20 minutes, the team received detailed briefings about their target location, enemy positions, and extraction procedures. During the briefing, Emma noticed that one of the secondary radios was starting to show signs of instability. Without saying anything, she began making adjustments to keep all systems running smoothly. She monitored signal strength, adjusted frequencies to avoid interference, and made real-time modifications to ensure perfect communication throughout the entire briefing. Lieutenant Harrison watched her work with growing respect. He had seen plenty of technicians over the years, but most of them followed procedures and played it safe. Emma was different. She understood the equipment so well that she could make it do things it wasn't supposed to do, and she had the courage to take risks when the mission required it. At 5:37 a.m., the SEALs finished their briefing and began their final equipment checks. Emma continued monitoring the radio systems, making small adjustments to maintain optimal performance. She had created a custom configuration that worked perfectly for the current conditions, but it required constant attention to keep everything balanced. The team was preparing to leave when Lieutenant Harrison realized they would need continuous communication support during the mission. The modified radio setup was too complex for anyone else to operate, and if something went wrong during the operation, they would need someone who could fix it immediately. He made a decision that surprised everyone, including Emma. Lieutenant Harrison asked her to join the mission as their communications specialist. It wasn't standard procedure. Technicians usually stayed at base, while combat teams went into the field. But this wasn't a standard situation, and Harrison knew that having Emma with them could mean the difference between mission success and failure. Emma felt her heart racing as she considered the request. She had trained for combat situations, but she had never been on an actual mission before. At the same time, she knew her modified radio system better than anyone else, and she was confident she could keep communications running no matter what challenges they faced. She agreed to join the team and spent the next 30 minutes gathering portable radio equipment and backup components. Emma packed everything into a lightweight kit that she could carry without slowing down the team. She also prepared emergency procedures and backup frequencies in case the main system failed. At 6:45 a.m., the team loaded into their vehicles and began the journey to the mission site. Emma sat in the back of the lead vehicle, monitoring radio traffic and making sure all systems remained operational. The ride was bumpy and dusty, but the communication equipment continued working perfectly. During the drive, Emma learned more about the mission. The team was tasked with gathering intelligence from an enemy compound and extracting a valuable asset. The operation required precise timing and coordination with multiple support units, which meant communication would be absolutely critical throughout the entire mission. As they approached the target area, Emma began noticing interference from enemy jamming equipment. The signal strength fluctuated, and some frequencies became unusable. But her modified system was designed to handle exactly this kind of challenge. She quickly switched to backup frequencies and adjusted the power output to maintain clear communication. At 8:21 a.m., the team reached their observation point overlooking the enemy compound. Emma set up the main communication array while the SEALs prepared their surveillance equipment. Within minutes, she had established solid connections with headquarters, air support, and the extraction team. The intelligence gathering phase lasted nearly 2 hours. Emma continuously monitored all communication channels, relaying information between different units and making sure everyone stayed coordinated. When enemy jamming efforts intensified, she adapted by using frequency hopping techniques and signal encryption that made their communications nearly impossible to intercept. Lieutenant Harrison found himself relying more and more on Emma's expertise. She not only kept the radios working, but also provided valuable tactical advice based on what she was hearing from different units. Her understanding of communication protocols and signal intelligence gave the team important insights about enemy positions and movements. At 10:53 a.m., the situation became more complex. The asset they needed to extract was located in a heavily guarded building, and the original extraction plan had to be modified based on new intelligence. Emma coordinated with multiple aircraft and ground units to develop an alternative approach that would minimize risk while ensuring mission success. The modified plan required split-second timing and perfect communication between all units involved. Emma created a detailed communication schedule that synchronized the movements of the SEAL team, air support, extraction helicopters, and backup ground forces. Any breakdown in communication could result in friendly fire incidents or mission failure. As the team prepared to move toward the compound, Emma made final adjustments to ensure optimal radio performance. She had been monitoring the electromagnetic environment for hours and had identified the best frequencies and power levels for each phase of the operation. At 11:32 a.m., the mission entered its active phase. Emma moved with the SEAL team as they approached the target building, maintaining constant communication with all support units. Her radio equipment worked flawlessly, providing clear audio even in the midst of complex terrain and enemy interference. The extraction itself was intense and required continuous coordination between multiple moving parts. Emma's voice became the central hub that connected all units involved in the operation. She relayed position updates, coordinated timing for air support, and provided real-time intelligence that helped the team navigate through unexpected challenges. When enemy forces began responding to the SEAL team's presence, Emma's communication skills became even more critical. She coordinated defensive fire from supporting units while simultaneously guiding the extraction helicopters to the pickup point. Her calm, professional voice kept everyone focused and coordinated during the most chaotic moments of the mission. At 12:47 p.m., the extraction was completed successfully. All team members and the valuable asset were safely aboard the helicopters and heading back to base. Emma continued monitoring communication channels during the flight, ensuring that all units were accounted for and that no enemy forces were pursuing them. The mission was a complete success, largely because of Emma's exceptional communication support. Her modified radio systems had performed perfectly under the most demanding conditions, and her technical expertise had enabled a level of coordination that would have been impossible with standard equipment. Back at the base, Lieutenant Harrison gathered his team for the mission debrief. As they reviewed what had happened, it became clear that Emma's contributions had been absolutely essential to their success. Her willingness to take technical risks, her deep understanding of communication systems, and her calm performance under pressure had made her an invaluable member of the team. What happened next surprised everyone in the room. Lieutenant Harrison stood up and called Emma to the front of the group. In front of the entire SEAL team and several other officers who had gathered for the debrief, he gave her a formal military salute, a gesture of respect and recognition that is rarely given to support personnel by combat unit leaders. The significance of that moment wasn't lost on anyone present. SEALs are known for their high standards and their reluctance to show appreciation for anyone who hasn't proven themselves in combat. For Lieutenant Harrison to salute Emma in front of his team was an extraordinary recognition of her contribution to the mission's success. Emma felt overwhelmed by the gesture. She had joined the mission thinking she was just there to fix radios, but she had ended up playing a crucial role in a complex military operation. The salute from Lieutenant Harrison represented not just his personal respect, but the acknowledgement from an elite military unit that technical expertise and dedication were just as valuable as combat skills. The other SEAL team members joined their lieutenant in showing their appreciation for Emma's work. They had started the mission with doubts about having a technician join them in the field, but they finished it with complete respect for her abilities and professionalism. Word of Emma's performance spread quickly through the base. Other units began requesting her services for their communication needs, and headquarters took notice of the innovative solutions she had developed. Her modified radio systems became the basis for new communication protocols that were eventually adopted throughout the region. More importantly, Emma had proven that technical specialists could be valuable members of combat teams when they had the right combination of expertise, courage, and dedication. Her success opened doors for other support personnel to take on more active roles in military operations. The mission became a turning point in Emma's military career. She received several commendations for her performance and was eventually promoted to a position where she could train other communication specialists. But she never forgot the moment when Lieutenant Harrison saluted her, recognizing that her contribution to the mission had been just as important as that of any combat soldier. Years later, when Emma told the story of that mission, she always emphasized how teamwork and mutual respect had made their success possible. The SEALs had given her the opportunity to prove herself, and she had risen to meet their high standards. Together, they had accomplished something that none of them could have achieved alone. The lesson from that day was clear. In military operations, success depends not just on combat skills, but on the dedication and expertise of every team member, regardless of their official role. Emma Walsh had started as just a technician repairing radios, but she had ended up as a respected member of an elite military team, earning recognition that would last for the rest of her career.